Welcome to Animated World. Bedtime Stories Part 4.
The Foolish Lion and the Clever Rabbit. Once upon a time, in a large forest, there lived many animals, all living together. But one day, a bad lion came, who was just mean to everybody and thought he could eat everybody in the forest. He was vicious and powerful. As a result, he would go about the forest and kill the other animals, even when he did not want to eat them. Whenever he was hungry, he would run and chase even the quickest animals and devour them in an instant. As a result, the animals started dwindling in numbers. The animals then came up with an intelligent plan. They went to the lion and said,
"Our king, please listen to our plea. The rate at which you are hunting us will soon lead to us being extinct. We request you to stay in your den, and in return we will send you one animal every day as your food."
The lion agreed with this convenient arrangement, as he would no longer need to venture out in search of a meal. So the animal sent one animal every day for the lion to eat. Soon enough, it was the turn of a tiny rabbit. He was terrified because he knew he would be gobbled up by the ravenous lion in a flash, but he was also very smart. He waited till afternoon to go to the lion's den. As he walked up to the lion, he devised a brilliant plan. He was determined to beat the lion at his own game. He knew the lion would be famished by now and impatient as ever. So the rabbit walked even more slowly and finally arrived at the lion's den by sunset. As expected, the hungry lion was pacing up and down. He roared and asked,
"Why are you so late? And why have they sent me one puny rabbit? As though one little rabbit will satisfy my hunger."
He also vowed to kill the other animals in the forest due to their lack of consideration. The rabbit was calm and said,
"So, great lion, there were 6 rabbits in total when we started, but one ferocious lion met us on the way. He took 5 of the other rabbits. He would not let me go, so I told him we already have you as our mighty king. He was extremely angry and spared me to inform you that he is now the new king. You have to leave the forest at once, or he would kill you," he said.
The lion was shocked and enraged to hear this.
"Take me to this other lion's den.
He said to the rabbit.
I will kill him and show him who is king indeed."
The bad lion thought he could overpower and eat the other 5 rabbits as well. And so the rabbit took him to a deep well that was filled with water.
"He lives inside a big cave in this well."
The rabbit told the furious lion. As they were both standing on the edge of the well, the rabbit pointed into the well and said,
"There he is, Your Majesty."
When the lion looked into the well, he saw his own reflection in the water. As reflections in the water appear substantially huge, the silly lion was infuriated. He roared at his reflection inside the deep well. The roar echoed back at him from the well, and the foolish lion thought it was the other lion roaring at him. Without giving it another thought, the lion jumped into the well. Since the well was quite deep, he could not swim and climb back up. The rabbit ran away and left the helpless lion alone in the well. Moral of the story: wisdom outsmarts physical strength. The wee rabbit was wise and could beat the lion with his intelligence. The jealous lion did not think of his actions and only acted on impulse. His hunger and his ego had numbed his mind. The brave little deer. Once upon a time, in a lush green forest, there lived a young deer named Dazzle. Dazzle was known for her beautiful, shimmering coat that sparkled in the sunlight. She was a curious and adventurous deer, always eager to explore the forest and make new friends. One day, while wandering near the edge of the forest, Dazzle heard a faint cry for help. Following the sound, she discovered a small rabbit trapped in a hunter's snare. The rabbit was frightened and struggling to free itself. Dazzle knew she had to help. Using her sharp hooves, Dazzle carefully worked to loosen the snare. It took some time, but eventually she managed to free the rabbit. The grateful rabbit introduced himself as Thumper and thanked Dazzle for her bravery. They quickly became friends and decided to explore the forest together. As they ventured deeper into the woods, they encountered various challenges. They crossed a fast-flowing river, navigated through a dense thicket, and even outsmarted a cunning fox. Through it all, Dazzle's courage and quick thinking kept them safe. One evening, as they were resting by a sparkling stream, they heard a rustling in the bushes. Out stepped a majestic stag, the leader of the forest animals. He had heard of Dazzle's bravery and wanted to thank her personally. The stag invited Dazzle and Thumper to a grand feast in their honor. At the feast, all the forest animals gathered to celebrate Dazzle's heroism. They feasted on the finest berries, nuts, and fruits the forest had to offer. Dazzle and Thumper were showered with praise and gifts from their new friends. From that day on, Dazzle was known as the bravest deer in the forest. She continued to explore and help others, always accompanied by her loyal friend Thumper. Together, they made the forest a safer and happier place for all its inhabitants. And so, Dazzle and Thumper lived happily ever after, their bond of friendship growing stronger with each passing day. A Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank, underneath the root of a very big fir tree.
"Now, my dears,"
said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning,
"you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out."
Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out,
"Stop, thief!"
Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time he began to wander about, going lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some gold fish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter.
1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime.
But Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. Reynard the Fox. King Noble the Lion decided to hold a big court session to pass judgment on the many crimes of Reynard the Fox. He had insulted Isegrim the wolf and his wife, stolen the last sausages from Curtis the dog, and had eaten all the children of Chanticleer the cock. Yes, Reynard had played so many tricks that King Noble had asked Bruin the bear to bring him to court. So Bruin the bear set off a castle Malapart where Reynard lived. Once he arrived, he shouted loudly,
"Lord Cousin, open up! I come as an envoy of the king and challenge you to court."
Reynard heard this and quickly tried to come up with a trick. He kindly approached Bruin and said,
Hello, dear uncle. Of course I would love to come, but I have a stomachache.
"Oh, what's the matter?"
asked Bruin the bear.
Honey?
Answered Reynard.
I don't normally eat it, but I was so hungry.
Bruin the bear began to salivate at the thought of honey and asked if Reynard had any for him.
Of course,
said Reynard, and he took Bruin to the garden of Carpenter Rust. Here lay a split tree trunk full of honey.
Just stick your head in here,
said the fox. Bruin, who was unaware of any mischief, did so and immediately got stuck. Reynard made his escape. Roaring with pain and with the greatest difficulty, Bruin managed to pull his head out of the tree trunk, but his feet remained stuck. Reynard laughed at him and fled to his castle. The noise attracted Carpenter Rust's attention, and he found a bear in his backyard. Out of fear, he quickly called all the other people from the village to kill the bear. Fortunately, Bruin was able to free himself in time, but he hurt his paw in the process. Furious, Bruin returned to King Noble's court. When the king heard the whole story from Bruin, he too was angry and promised revenge. He now sent Tybert the cat to pick up Reynard. When Tybert arrived in Malapart and delivered his message, Reynard offered to take him to a place where there were a lot of mice, so he could enjoy himself after his journey. He took the cat to the shed of the priest. In the wall of the shed, Reynard had made a hole to easily steal a little chicken. However, the priest was aware of this and had set a trap. When Tibbet the cat crawled through the hole in search of mice, he got stuck instead of Reynard. Tibbet begged the fox for help, but Reynard laughed at him and made his escape. When the priest came into the shed and saw the prisoner, he thought it was Reynard, the thief. He quickly gathered his servants and together they wanted to kill the prisoner. Fortunately, Tybert was able to break the trap, but he hurt his eye during his escape. When the king heard Tybert's story, he was furious and now sent Grimbard the badger to pick up Reynard. And lo and behold, Grimbard succeeded in bringing Reynard to court. All the accusations were read out on the spot. It didn't look good for Reynard. But when Reynard started talking about the great treasure in Flanders, the king suddenly became lenient. In exchange for the treasure, Reynard would be granted mercy. Bellin the ram and Kieward the hare would accompany him to collect the treasure just to be sure. Once they arrived in Malapart, Reynard left the ram waiting outside and went inside with the hare. But as soon as they were inside, Reynard bit the hare to death and ate him. Reynard gave the hare's head as a message to the king to be delivered by Bellin the ram. The king was beside himself with anger and had Reynard forcefully removed from his residence. But Reynard was a clever talker, and in no time he had convinced the king that Bellin the ram was the guilty one and he himself was innocent. He even offered to fight for his freedom with Isegrim the wolf. His offer was accepted, and Reynard the Fox outsmarted the wolf. Now King Noble declared him free, made him a baron and councillor, and led him in a procession to his castle Malapart. Peter Pan. Once upon a time in London, there lived 3 children. Wendy, John and Michael were their names. One night, Wendy woke up and saw a strange boy sitting on the floor. He looked cross.
"My name is Wendy,"
she said, and asked the boy,
"Who are you, and why do you look so cross?"
The boy replied,
I'm Peter Pan. I'm cross because my shadow won't stick to me.
"Oh, I can fix that."
Wendy said, and sewed Peter's shadow to the tips of his shoes. Peter was now happy.
Will you please fly back to Neverland with me and my fairy, Tinkerbell?
Peter asked Wendy.
You could be our mother and take care of us?
"Will you teach me how to fly?"
Wendy asked, and Peter nodded.
"I'll wake John and Michael up. If you teach all of us to fly, we can go to Neverland."
Wendy said. It wasn't long before all 3 children were flying around in the bedroom. Suddenly, with a whoosh, they all flew out of the window and followed the golden arrows that pointed the way to the beautiful land of Neverland. Soon, all of them were flying over the island. Peter told them that the Lost Boys live with Tinkerbell and him.
Mermaids live over there in the lagoon, and there are pirates too. Their boss is Captain Hook.
Peter said.
"Pirates?"
Asked Wendy, a bit frightened. But Michael and John wished to see the pirates right away. Peter said to them,
Hook's the meanest pirate ever, but he's frightened of the crocodiles.
Peter told them that a crocodile had bitten Hook's hand off years ago. The crocodile liked the taste so much that it followed him, hoping for more. But the crocodile had swallowed his clock, and the tick-tock sound warned Hook when the crocodile is nearby.
Oh, I'm not sure I want to stay in Neverland after all."
Wendy said. Peter then took Wendy, John, and Michael to his house in the woods, through a secret door.
Will you be our mother?
The Lost Boys shouted when they saw Wendy.
But I'm only a little girl.
Replied Wendy.
Oh, all right, I'll do my best.
Wendy said, as the Lost Boys were sad. And so, Wendy tucked the boys into bed that night and told them a story. One day, Peter and the children went exploring around the Mermaid's Lagoon. All of a sudden, Peter yelled,
Pirates! Hide, everyone!
The boys ran away. While Wendy and Peter hid, Peter saw that the pirates had tied up Tiger Lily, the Indian princess, to a rock. Peter must save her, he shouted in Captain Hook's voice.
Set the princess free. Captain, you told us to bring her here.
One of the pirates yelled.
Let her go.
Peter roared in Captain's voice again.
Aye, Captain.
The pirate said, and set the princess free. When Captain Hook found out about this, he knew that Peter had tricked the pirates and was very angry. That night, Wendy told the Lost Boys a story about 3 children who left their parents and flew to Neverland. She told them that their mother and father missed them very much.
Did they ever go back to them?
Asked one of the Lost Boys.
Yes,
Replied Wendy.
they flew home to their mother and father, and everyone was happy like before.
This made Wendy, John, and Michael feel homesick, and they decided to fly back home the following morning.
If you come back with us, I'm sure our parents would look after you.
Wendy told the Lost Boys.
Yay! Hooray!
Shouted the Lost Boys in excitement. But Peter and Tinker Bell didn't want to live where grown-ups told children what to do. So, Peter was sad that his friends will leave soon. He asked Tinker Bell to guide all of them to home. Early the next morning, Tinker Bell and the children left Peter's house. Captain Hook's pirates were hiding nearby to capture all the children. They caught them, tied them up, and took them to the pirates' ship. Tinker Bell escaped and flew back to tell Peter what had happened.
Who wants to be a pirate?
Asked Captain Hook, and the boys shook their heads.
Make them walk on the planks.
Shouted Captain Hook. The boys were afraid, but tried to act brave. Suddenly, all of them heard the tick tock of the crocodile, and now Captain Hook was afraid. But it was Peter pretending to be a crocodile by producing a similar sound to the crocodile's tick-tock. Peter flew onto the ship and shouted,
I've got you now, Hook.
Captain Hook jumped up and swung at Peter with his sword, but he missed and it fell right into the sea. Unfortunately, the crocodile was waiting for him in the water, and that was the end of Captain Hook. Peter and Tinker Bell set off for London with Wendy, John, Michael, all the boys. Wendy's mother and father were very happy to see their children again and hugged them. They also said that they would look after all the lost boys.
I'm going to stay in Neverland, where I never have to grow up.
Peter said.
Goodbye, Peter. We'll miss you.
Everyone bid him goodbye. So Peter Pan and Tinker Bell flew back home to Neverland. The Rabbit and the Dog. Once upon a time, in the heart of a lush green forest, there lived a curious little rabbit named Henry. Henry was admired by all the forest inhabitants for his soft, fluffy white fur and his sparkling blue eyes. Nearby, in a cozy little doghouse, lived a brave dog named Max. He was a brown and white spotted dog, known for his playful nature and bark that echoed throughout the forest. One sunny day, Henry hopped over to Max's doghouse. "Max," he said, "I've heard about a legendary treasure hidden deep within the forest. Shall we find it?" Max wagged his tail excitedly at the thought of an adventure, and the two friends set off, following the trail that led deeper into the forest. They hiked up steep hills and waded through cold streams. Despite the challenges, their spirits remained high, and they pressed on, driven by the thrill of the treasure hunt. As the sun began to set, they found themselves in front of a large, mysterious cave. Max's tail stiffened, and his eyes widened. Henry whispered, "This must be where the treasure is." Max took a deep breath and stepped into the cave. Henry hopping closely behind him. Inside, they found themselves surrounded by sparkling gemstones embedded in the cave walls. Deeper into the cave, they found a small golden chest. As Henry hopped forward to open it, Max stood guard, his ears pricked and alert. Henry slowly opened the chest. Inside was a beautiful, glowing stone. Its light illuminated the entire cave, reflecting off the gemstones and creating a stunning spectacle. Both friends were in awe of the beautiful sight. Henry picked up the stone, and it shimmered in his paws. They had found the legendary treasure they had set out to find. Their hearts filled with joy. They decided to share the news of their discovery with the rest of the forest inhabitants. They made their way back, the glowing stone safely tucked in Henry's paws. As they reached the edge of the forest, they could see their friends waiting anxiously. They greeted Max and Henry with cheers and wagging tails as they showcased the glowing treasure. The forest inhabitants were overjoyed. They admired the glowing stone and congratulated Max and Henry on their successful adventure. The forest was filled with laughter and joy. Max and Henry felt proud of their achievement. The experience had not only brought them a legendary treasure, but also strengthened their bond of friendship. That night, they sat under the stars, looking at the glowing stone. They chatted and laughed, remembering the adventure they had been on. It was a perfect end to an exciting day. From that day on, the story of Max and Henry's adventure was told to every new inhabitant of the forest. The glowing stone became a symbol of their bravery, friendship, and the incredible treasure hunt. The Blue Jackal? Once upon a time, in a faraway jungle, lived a jackal. One day, he was walking in the jungle in search of food. Suddenly, he reached a quiet village and started roaming around. When the dogs in the village saw him, they surrounded him and tried to attack him. Not knowing what to do, he started running to save his life.
Come here, you jackal. Where do you think you are going? This is our area and we won't allow anyone else to wander here,
shouted the dogs as they ran behind the jackal. To save himself, the jackal ran into a nearby house which belonged to a washerman. In the backyard of the house, he saw 2 large tubs filled with blue dye. He looked here and there and, without thinking anything, jumped in the tub to save his life. After a while, he came out of the tub, not realizing his body was all blue. When the dogs saw him, they did not recognize him and were terrified, and they started running away, thinking it was some strange creature that could harm them. Confused about what was happening, he left for the jungle. When he reached the jungle, he saw the strange reactions of his jungle mates. Some started running after seeing him, while others started talking about things behind his back. He still did not understand what was happening. After some time, he went to the nearby river to drink water. Suddenly, he saw his reflection in the water and realized what was happening.
"Oh!"
exclaimed the jackal.
"This is why everyone is behaving so strangely."
That was when a cunning idea struck his mind. Immediately, he stood on a huge rock and gathered all the animals.
"Oh, my fellow mates, please don't be afraid of me,"
announced the jackal.
"The creator of this universe, God, has crafted me with his own hands. He has asked me to be the king of this jungle, as there is no suitable king here. I am here to protect you all and be your caretaker. Live happily in my kingdom."
All the animals believed him and obeyed all the instructions he gave them. He asked the monkeys to bring fresh fruits and the tigers and lions to bring meat for him. Everyone was engaged in obeying his orders and serving him. The very first thing he did after becoming the king was that he chased away all the jackals from the jungle. He was afraid they might recognize him, which would cause him trouble. This went on for a few days, and he was living the best of his life. Suddenly one day, while surrounded by the other animals, he heard the voice of jackals howling in a distance. Hearing the sound, he could not control himself. He stood up and started howling too. That was when the animals realized what was happening, and a cunning jackal had been fooling them for so many days. Meanwhile, he realized his foolishness and ran for his life. However, he couldn't escape from so many angry animals and met an unfortunate end.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel.